So we're going to tie all that in a moment to like how this applies to our regular lives and how it applies to having beach access. Right in the moment, we have Dan Marks from the island of Hawaii calling in, and he has some pieces that he wants to share about the Constitution and law. Aloha, you're on the air.
Aloha. Hi. Thanks, Felicia, for having me on.
Great.
I was just listening to that description of what he was talking about there. It's fascinating, actually. I was enjoying that quite a bit. I'm representing, actually, the Article5.org group. We are a group that assembled inside of Occupy, the Inter-Occupy Article 5 group is actually what we started out as.
Okay, and for the beginner, can you...
We are a group that was basically formed to trigger an Article 5 convention.
So for helping people out, Article 5 is a piece in the Constitution, right? Not everybody is all that familiar with what those. So in the United States Constitution and Article 5, can you tell us in really layman's terms what Article 5 tries to allow for?
Sure. Under Article 5, it says that basically if 2/3 of the states decide that they want to call a convention to propose amendments, Congress is required to call this convention into order. Once 2/3 of that convention, 66% of that convention agrees on a particular amendment, then that amendment goes out to the states and it's considered, and if 38 states agree to it, it becomes part of the Constitution. Unfortunately, we've never done this before in our nation's history, and it's amazing that we haven't done it yet. As it turns out that there's been a number of applications, actually over 700 of them, from 49 states. And actually, the only state that's never applied yet is Hawaii. They almost did back in the 70s for an exemption for federal taxes for municipalities. But it was kind of worded strangely.
So let me get this straight, because it's kind of complicated. When states petition for an Article 5, that's saying, hey, we want to make a change to the Constitution. And you're saying like 2/3 of the state raise their hand and say they want to do that, then they have to have some sort of convention or allow that to happen?
Right. It's a peremptory call by Congress. They're not allowed to send it to a committee, debate it. Basically, once that threshold's been crossed, it's a ministerial act of Congress. They're required by the Constitution to call the convention to order. We have just turned in a list of 42 states, not 34, but 42 states, to the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives at the instruction of Tom Wickham, the House parliamentarian, and he said go ahead and deliver that to them, and we're actually asking for verification and an official tabulation of which states have applied and which states have not.
So you're asking them. It's complicated, at least for me. That's why I keep asking. You're asking them to say who all's asked for this Article 5 convention. It's like you're bull rushing the Congress. Am I getting that right?
Well, not exactly. For those that and there's many different groups out there that would like to trigger this convention. The first thing we have to ask is who has applied and who hasn't. And when our group in Occupy took a look at the records, and we saw so many of them, and just about any legal opinion you wanted to shade these applications with, it seemed as though it crossed the threshold no matter which way you look at it. And if you think about it, if our forefathers didn't expect our nation to live, beyond 100 years, and if they ever expected this other option to be used in the Constitution, you would have expected it would have happened by now. So,
well, what do you want to change? I mean, I think I find that people hardly even vote. Of course, I would like them to go out and vote more.
Sure.
But I mean, like when we can't even get people to vote, what gives you confidence if we were to say, hey, we want a constitutional convention, that the same power-hungry personalities wouldn't just swoop right in and then change everything for the worse? How do we know it will go for the better?
This is a different kind of situation. We're talking about people that are, when you elect someone to Congress, you're electing a person or a party. When you're talking about an amendment to the Constitution, what you're really running on as a delegate to this Constitution is amendment itself, in black and white terms, you're saying, I support Amendment XYZ.
Like the Equal Rights Amendment was one that's come up in my lifetime for men and women to be considered equal, and that was voted down. They aren't equal as how the Constitution of the United States looks at it. Has any other come up since then?
Oh, sure. There's been the Balanced Budget Amendment, a number of amendments. There's many amendments that are being advocated for right now, such as a slew of them to overturn Citizens United. And I think that's one of the reasons that I think that a convention is most necessary, too, is that when we passed the 17th Amendment, the direct election of senators, it was very obvious what the solution was. We allowed the direct election of senators. When we're talking about overturning Citizens United or addressing, the problems in Buckley-Vallejo, we're talking about some very complex decisions about how we limit political speech, and there's not really a lot of consensus around these kinds of ideas. So these are something that we have to come together as people.
And for the listener who doesn't know what Citizens United means, that's a recent Supreme Court decision that viewed corporations as people, so that they could spend as much as they want on campaign donations instead of being limited to $2,000. So it sort of created a super citizen.
But the convention would also go beyond that it also would address internet privacy. We could talk about prohibition of GMO farming. We can talk about the end of the prohibition of marijuana, or we could talk about Hawaiian sovereignty, too. That's another thing that a lot of people don't really talk about as a constitutional amendment. And I've approached a number of groups locally on our island about potentially coming up with an amendment proposal that the different nations of Hawaiian people can get together behind and get the American people to support. Because I think that it's very possible. We see in Australia recently they had an Indigenous Peoples' Rights Amendment that they passed. The UN also passed an Indigenous Rights Resolution for the UN. So there's ideas out there, but I think that there also has to be something from Hawaii that says it's got to be from the Hawaiian people that says this is what we need. So if can't exactly say what that is.
So if people petition for this Article 5, if there's enough states that petition for it, and you're asking for a tabulation so you can say who all's asked, they can just ask for the Constitutional Convention without having to be issue specific. So if enough states say, hey, we want to come in and do some direct action, that's what you're advocating for, and there's a petition circulating right now for people to...
Yes, there is. We've got a petition on change.org. You can get to it from our website at articlev.org. It's Article 5, but we do it with a Roman numeral V. So that's Article V.
ARTICLEV.org?
V is in Victor, yeah.
Okay. We're at the bottom of the hour at 4:30, so you're listening to KKCR Hanalei, KAQA Kilauea. So let's bring these things to practical terms. Like for the person driving down the street, why do they care about these things?
I guess why the average person should care about having an Article 5 convention. Basically, our government is broken. I don't expect this government to repair itself. We can't even seem to pay our bills these days. I think we're at the point that our forefathers had predicted, where we would have to do this kind of thing. And the Constitution is something that affects each and every one of us every day. How we, keep our faith. It defines our mission as a society. It defines who we are as a people. It absolutely affects each and every one of us every day. And if we can, as a people, decide, that is our Constitution. It says we the people right there at the beginning of it. If we say, we don't want GMOs in our country anymore, so be it. That's the law. If we say we don't want to have a fossil fuel-based economy anymore, that's it. It's the law.
When we look at the preamble of the Constitution, we the people and our posterity do ordain and establish this Constitution. Well, the question is, who are we the people? And the answer is very surprising to most people, because we the people is not each and every person. We the people are the group who were existing under the Articles of Confederation, who we the people are forming a more perfect union, an already existing union. So we the people, it turns out, if you read the Constitution and all the documents which lead up to it, are actually the people who, or the persons who were alive during the Revolutionary War and under the Articles of Confederation, and when the Constitution was written. And they did not include the foreigners. So everyone who came afterwards, vagrants, vagabonds accepted, and incompetents. So the people are only those who can trace their ancestry back to the Revolutionary War and who are not incompetent.
So there's all kinds of a subtle game that's going on underneath these things. Dan, do you have any final words?
Well, I would have to disagree with that. The people are the people that created the Constitution are dead. The Constitution, among all nations, is what I said. It defines their purpose. It defines their goal. And we as a people need to stand up and take it back. It doesn't belong to our government. It is ours. We do direct our society. And I think that if anything, the realization that I hope people take to heart is that it really does belong to us, and we do have that control.
And I would agree completely with that it really does belong to us.
I think we're actually all on the same page. I'm all about individual sovereignty. You know, the more home rule that we have, the more locally based that we claim our power is really where the strength is. And I don't think that actually is in conflict with the original plan of the Constitution. But even if it is, I don't care. I mean, you know, like Hawaii is an occupied nation within another occupied nation. We need to look where we're at now, make things work for where we're at now, and move forward. You know, we don't have to be governed by something that happened, you know, a couple hundred years ago, especially that wasn't including me as a female.
Well, Felicia, it's important. If we want to affect change, we have to know how the system works.
Yes. That's why you're in here.
And that's really what I'm advocating, is for us to understand how things work. Because when we really peel back the veil and we see the actuality of what's happening, it tends to make a lot more sense, and then we can put our efforts into changing it. I believe the way that we will affect change the way Dan wants to, that I hear Dan saying, is that we will first own the government as it was originally intended. And to do that, we have to know how to go about that. And right now, the way things are set up is that the system gives us fights to fight, which are the wrong fight. And we spend a lot of effort and a lot of activity fighting fights that are inconsequential. And
they're distractions.
They're distractions. And this is set up by the commercial system. And that is the way that the commercial system maintains control, is to get all of the people fighting with each other. And they give us red herrings so that each and every person, you know, has their individual thing that they're very concerned about. There are some very concrete things that we can do as a group of people and all persons, which can affect things and give us back ownership to the government.
Okay, and thank you. And Dan, I hope that you can continue listening on www.kkcr.org.
Feel free to call back.
And hey, thanks for having me on too.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.